Hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you back to my channel. Thank you very much for finding me. If you're new here, I grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia without a greenhouse or grow light or humidifier. Just me, my very amateur talent growing things indoors or outdoors or not at all. So if that sounds of any interest to you, do hit subscribe. I post once a week, every Friday, chronicling my continuing adventures to try and figure out how and what to grow in my environment. And yes, you may have noticed before us this amazing display of Pleione orchids. Look at these. So guess what? The subject of today's video is, ta-da, Pleione orchids. And plant lovers, I'm kind of mixed results. So I can always get them to bloom. Getting them to bloom is easy once you've got the bulbs. It's the next steps that I've sort of fallen with, I feel. Anyway, we will go through the highs and the lows of my Pleione growing now. But as ever, let's start at the very beginning, as Julie Andrews would have had us all do, and that is, where are they from? Well, they are we're going to say terrestrial, but they're terrestrial epiphytes or terrestrial. So they often just grow in sort of mossy mounds or nooks. They can grow on trees in a mossy mound, or they can actually grow on the ground in the soil. There's a huge array of species, and they stretch all the way from the Himalayas all the way down through sort of Southeast Asia, across into China, Cambodia, Laos, all the way down until we kind of hit the tropics. And they are a cooler, sort of colder grower, often at the foothills of mountains. So they can take quite cold temperatures, and here in Australia, well, here in Melbourne, they can certainly spend all year outdoors, which mine do. And given the vast range of their natural habitat, there is a lot of different species, so each one does have slightly different conditions, and some can be warmer growers, but most of them are cooler, colder growers, and most of the hybrids that you're going to find in cultivation are cool growers. So this one is Pleione formosana, and that is the most common species one to have found in cultivation, and often the parent for many hybrids. So there you go. Now this is more than likely a hybrid. It just happens to be white, so I don't know what the name is particularly. It is just, let us say, a no ID Pleione formosana. And Formosa would suggest it is from Taiwan, which is kind of true, but it also comes from many other parts of Southeast Asia. So there you go, Pleione formosana. And Pleione, of course, is a bit of a Greek goddess, and curious because, of course, these plants do not grow in Europe. They are exclusively endemic to Southeast Asia. But Pleione was the mother of the Pleiades, so 7 daughters, who are also memorialized in the stars. And her name means multiplying. So the kind of irony is, as we'll get to find out, is that the bulbs do multiply a lot. So that name kind of makes sense. So let us talk, plant lovers, care. Now it is early spring here in Australia. It is the first couple of weeks of September in the Southern Hemisphere, obviously, and the Pleiones have burst into bloom. So they don't take very long from the buds emerging to the flowers opening, literally a matter of weeks. And they are a beautiful sort of harbinger of spring and the warmth to come. Now they're not super long lasting, only really a couple of weeks, but nonetheless, I find quite easy and sort of not really taking up much time and space. So we're a beautiful showy orchid. So flowers emerge in spring, as we can see here. And there are many hybrids with amazing colors, variants of pink to purples, etc. I think there might even be one that's yellow, and of course white. So that's kind of the color group that they appear in. And you can see that some have 1 flower per spike and some have 2. So I'll come in and show you closer, but we have these really sort of fat pseudobulbs, and then the flower emerges from the side of the pseudobulb and comes up. And in fact, they're closely related, apparently, biologically, to cotyledons, which kind of makes sense, because when you look at those bulbs, it does look like, say, cotyledon cristata, just without the leaves, but the flowers come from the same spot. So I can understand that. But culture-wise, you kind of treat these more like a bulb, more like a sort of a species tulip, for example. So the life cycle is, in spring, your bulbs will produce these beautiful flowers. Then the flower dies down, and then your bulbs will start to produce leaves. Now, it just so happens, plant lovers, that we can step back in time to last summer, and I took some footage of these in leaf just to show you what they look like. And they are quite beautiful. Let's have a look. Summer. Here you can see my Pleione pot looking very lush and healthy, and you can see that the leaf growth is very similar to other terrestrial orchids, but also to Lycaste and other orchids that are deciduous annually. Anyway, so this is what mine is looking like right now. So it's summer here in Australia. The leaves are still very green and verdant, so I'm still watering it. Not very often because I don't want to keep it too soggy, but I'm watering it. I am also occasionally feeding it with a liquid fertilizer, but remembering that I put a lot of slow release fertilizer into the medium when I potted these up in winter, because these things are heavy feeders. So I put a lot in, which is a slow release fertilizer, which will basically, I think, see it through the year. And then those little top ups throughout the growing season, which is spring, summer, just to give it a little fillip. Now, the other thing that I did, as you can see, I actually got 2 of these when I was in Collector's Corner filming my Christmas special. I noticed these on the sale counter. So Pleione orchids, when the flowers die, are not very attractive. So you often find them sold at a discount. And then the other thing is that they do look really good massed in a pot. So plant the bulbs as tightly together as you can, so that in spring when you bloom, you basically just have a pot full of that amazing flowering. So it is summer, the leaves are still green. You will see when the leaves start to turn yellow, and that is going to be in autumn. Depends though how warm or not your season might be. So just watch the plant. When the leaves naturally start to yellow and start to die off, really turn down the watering. Can take cold temperatures, and it needs that cool winter to stimulate the flowers for next year. That is the summer checkup. We'll look at them as I'm repotting them, and then we'll look at them in spring when they're all doing their magnificent flowery action. So as you can see, the leaves look like quite a few other types of orchids, very arching and really, really quite beautiful leaves. So not a bad kind of plant unto itself, just for the leaf value. So those leaves then yellow and will die down to the tip of the bulb and will eventually drop off. And that's when you need to really turn down your watering and stop feeding. And then basically, and this is where I have stumbled, you kind of just need to leave them alone. Now, in the past, what I have done is literally left the pot in under a table, under a bench, under cover, so no water whatsoever. And I feel this is my mistake. I feel that my bulbs have essentially desiccated, because of course in the wild they do have less water but not no water, and the ambience around them, their moss and the mist, etc., is quite moisture laden. So I have been looking at other growers in Australia, and they do just tend to kind of leave them under trees, so somewhere sheltered in summer and autumn where they are not going to get drenched, but they're still getting ambient water. So I feel this is my mistake, because my problem has been that I just don't get the new bulbs. Anyway, so what happens is you get your bulb which flowers, and then around the base of that bulb you'll start to get new bulbs growing, bulbils or bulblets, whatever you want to call them. And it's those plants or bulblets that are going to be your flowering plant eventually. But it takes a couple of growing seasons for that bulb to mature and be ready to bloom. So you've got to kind of maintain the growth and health of those bulblets over time. And I feel this is where I dropped the ball, as it were. So the old bulb, once they've flowered, will start to shrivel and die, because that's their work is done. What all of this energy in the bulb is going to do now is to produce the new plants, which will flower for you in a couple of years' time. So that's what you've got to try and do. That's the kind of the key to growing these, is fatten up your bulbs, as they say in certain circles, and then allow them to bloom, allow them to reproduce themselves, nurture those bulblets as they get bigger over a couple of seasons. They will then bloom, rinse and repeat. So it's not an annual cycle, it takes a few years. And one of the issues can be if you keep them too wet in their dormancy period, which is really sort of late autumn into winter, of course they can rot, which is the case with any bulb, a species tulip or a regular daffodil. Bulbs can rot if they're kept wet. So the thing is, what I'm now going to do is to not cease watering them completely, but just make sure they're not wringing wet, that they're somewhere protected, but they are getting a little bit of ambient rain over that dormancy period. And so then late winter, you are ready to start repotting them. And I do repot these every year because they are pretty ferocious feeders, and lots of plants that do a lot of growth in one season are. So I put a lot of slow release fertilizer into the mix. But you know what, plant lovers? I don't need to talk about this. I can show you because I made a video of when I repotted these. So let's go and have a look at that. Here we are, plant lovers. It is midwinter and I have received a box of new Pleione bulbs, which is very exciting, which we will unbox now. And then we have last year's specimens, as you can see, quite, I was going to say dead, but dormant is the appropriate word. And then we have two little pots that I bought on sale at a nursery that I just stumbled across. So we'll unearth these and see what viable bulbs there are. Well, here is my assorted potting paraphernalia. But first, I think we need to open this box and just see what we've got. Now, as I mentioned, or will mention, or haven't yet but will now, I basically buy Pleione bulbs every year just to top up the ones that I have and maybe get different colors, etc., etc. But what I discovered, which is really, really sad, is that the company that I always used to get them from has closed down. So no more Pleione bulbs for me. Just so happens though that I found someone on Facebook Marketplace that was selling some white Pleione bulbs, which I wasn't particularly looking for, but I couldn't find any others. So they were reasonably priced. Let's have a look. Very nice packaging, I must say. Oh, there we go. Look at how fat and juicy they are, and they've already started to shoot. So you must be really careful when handling these, because if you knock that shoot off, you're done and dusted, basically. And as you can see, we've got two shoots. How wonderful. Goodness me, these are very healthy looking bulbs. There's another one with two shoots and another one. And these are in fact the flower buds that we're looking at here. So you need to be incredibly careful with them because, as I said, if you knock them off, you are done. Look at those. It's like fabulous Fabergé Easter eggs, except it's midwinter. Now, what is in here? Pleione No Name Purple in a wedding cake box. And Pleione Formosa pink variety. There we are. Let's just see how these bulbs have travelled. Aha, there we are. So there we have a wonderfully sized bulb, and there we have some little bulbils. There we go. And then this one, Pleione No Name Purple. We love a little bit of no name. And there we are, look at that one. Again, fabulous flower spike. And some little bulbils, there we are. Gorgeous. Okay, so here are my new bulbs, which are all fat and juicy and healthy. Let's just unearth these and see what we have got in these pots. So these are the ones that I bought last year. Well, what we have is these little bulbils here, which I am just going to gently pull off. So there you go. We have little bulbils. So actually what you can see here, this is a great example. You might be able to see that in the middle you have the dead, shriveled old bulb, and then around it we've got this circle of little new bulbs. So these are the ones that are going to bring us new life. So we're just trimming off those old dead roots because we don't need them. They're going to produce fabulous new roots. There we can see a little bulbil with its shoot coming out there. There we go, there's another one with its spike just emerging there. So yes, you just have to be really careful when taking these apart to make sure that you don't damage that little shoot. Okay, and then lastly, let's look at my previous year's bulbs and see how we are doing here. So essentially, the new bulbs should just be on the surface around the old ones. So here we have the old dead bulb and here we have the new bulbs, and they look a little shriveled actually, I must say. All right, well, I'm going to reuse my pot, so I'm just going to empty out all of that. And so now to repot the new ones. In the base, I am just going to put a handful of out of the bag orchid mix just to give us a little bit of extra drainage. So that is the sort of the larger bark pieces with a little bit of of gritty soil, I guess. And then the rest is just regular potting mix, essentially. So let's put that in. And then at this point, I am going to put in my mycorrhizal fungi, as I always do, to help stimulate those new little roots as they emerge. There we go. And then the last thing is some slow release fertilizer. And I'm going to put quite a lot in there, more than I normally would, because these plants essentially only have 12 months to do all their magic growing. Okay, we'll just cover that a bit. So I've left about 3 centimeters or just over an inch there, because we're essentially going to be planting these bulbs to about 1/3 of their depth. So not a huge amount, not like you're burying daffodils or something. And I am planting these like that. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Look at the size of these bulbs, goodness me. They're just the most extraordinary ones. Well, there we go. I am going to need to get another pot because I don't have enough room. All right, so then what I'm doing is just sprinkling a little bit of soil over those. Then I will water that in so the soil settles a little bit. And as you can see, our bulbs are just sort of popping out of the surface. So they're about 1/3 buried in the soil. So I'm going to have to get another pot for my other bulbs and my foundling bulbettes here. So there we are. There we have our 3 pots. Fabulous. Here we are then, plant lovers. So we will now just fast forward in time to when these are in bloom and see what they all look like. So from those plants that I bought on sale, I actually did get some bulbils, which I will show you, and they are starting to shoot. So I don't think I failed 100%, but it kind of wasn't the process that I was imagining. But now I understand that the time frame from the bulbil to blooming is a couple of years, not 1 year. So I was disappointed, thinking I've done something wrong. They haven't matured quickly enough, or I haven't given them enough love and food to mature. But it takes a while. But I did get lots of bulbils from those dead shriveled bulbs that had flowered. And in fact, what I will come in and show you is that they are all spiking. So not spiking with flowers, but they're spiking with leaves. So the next thing that's going to happen once your flowers die is that you get the leaves and the little bulbils, and you can see a little one in here. Obviously they're not flowering, so the first thing they do is send up a green leaf, and it's that leaf that is going to start photosynthesizing and give them all the energy for that bulb to increase, and then rinse and repeat the next year, and then it will bloom and then produce offspring, and off you go. So what you could do is actually just leave them in the same pot, as long as you perhaps top dress them with a little bit of fresh, rich nutrient potting mix, and of course fertilizer throughout the growing season. So as I said, lots of slow release fertilizer in the mix, and then liquid applications of either a tonic such as worm juice or seaweed based solution, or liquid fertilizer which might be orchid based, just to give the plants enough energy as they're growing through the season. Pest wise, I have just noticed actually that some of these do have aphids. So these are outdoors all year. So aphids often do like flower buds and new flowers because they're so soft and juicy for them to get their evil proboscis into. So watch out for that. The other obvious thing is slugs and snails if you've got them outside, because the new shoots are really quite tender and very juicy and attractive. So bear that in mind. But peonies, if you're in an area that is particularly cold in winter or very wet, or for whatever reason, you can certainly grow them in pots indoors all year. The thing is to make sure that they are cool and dry-ish during their dormancy period. But as I said, I wouldn't let them dry out completely, but certainly don't keep them moist or soggy. And then when you start to see them spike, give them dappled light. So perhaps a curtain between them and the light source. Imagine they're an understory plant, nothing too strong. So there we are, plant lovers, peonies. They are so beautiful, and I think very easy to access, really, no matter where you are. The best time is to buy them as bulbs when they are in dormancy, so that is midwinter. So if you're interested in buying any of these, buy them midwinter, or buy them in flower so you can see what the flowers are and just understand what that process is going to be of the new leaves, the leaves dying, the bulb going into dormancy, producing new babies, and then giving you new growth in spring of either the leaf first as the bulb matures, or the flower from a matured bulb. Now, unfortunately, the place that I got mine from in Australia has gone out of business, and it's the only place I ever could find them regularly. I did, though, find these, and you're going to hate me for saying this, on Facebook Marketplace, and they were sold by a grower. And he just sent me the bulbs, which is really, really beautiful. So I do have some of my bulbils, which have sprouted, which are largely in this pot here. So this was one that I bought. I had one left over, and then the other little bulblets in here are the sort of the harvest of my others. So now that I understand the process a bit more, that it takes a couple of years for the bulbs to mature, I'm not so cross with myself because I've actually got quite a few plants growing here. So there you go. They expand, obviously, exponentially because each bulb can produce at least 2 new babies. So if you get it right and you don't desiccate and kill them, as I have done in the past, you should end up, and this is what I want, a huge sort of pan full of these beautiful orchids. And we covered this in the potting video, but essentially they don't need a very deep dish because they don't have huge root systems, and a free draining-ish mix, but you don't want it to dry out really quickly and really frequently. You do need it to retain a bit of moisture. So a bit of great potting mix or potting compost mixed with perhaps a little bit of bark just to keep it kind of free and easy is a great way to grow them. But wherever you are, whatever your climate is, you can figure out what works best for these glorious orchids. So there we are, plant lovers. I will revisit these next year to see how my bulbils have done, and we'll do a little video this time next year, so we'll see if I get any more. So the ones that I had before were pink, and I think that is all of these new plants growing in this pot. Hopefully they should be sort of pink and magenta. So if I can keep the white ones alive and reproducing and then mix in the pinks and purples, it will be the most beautiful pot of Pleiones. So there you go, plant lovers. Take everything I've said with a grain of salt, figure your own way out, totally depends on your climate, but I hope this has been of some use. Thank you for watching. Do hit subscribe if you want to follow my continuing adventures. I post every week on a Friday, and I hope all's well wherever you are, and I look forward to seeing you next week.